Morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. It is absolutely wonderful to see so many people here today, I must say, and familiar faces and new faces as well. And everybody I know has a connection around working with children across the city and near and far. So it's fantastic. Okay, so we might get started. So we're here today to gather for this online event to, I suppose, kickstart a wider conversation around child-friendly cities in Cork and to learn from others in our journey towards a child-friendly city and to build on all the wonderful, amazing work that's already happening. My name is Catherine Harford. I'm the manager of Let's Grow Together Infant and Childhood Partnerships on the north side of the city. And I am also one of the founding members of Cork Healthy Cities, which is where this piece of work is emerging from. And I suppose in that piece of work, I'm here today representing a large working group, interagency, multi-sectoral working group working on this piece of work together. So that's me. We also have a wonderful agenda of speakers today who I'll introduce as we go. And just to say, you probably can see Hazel squirreling away in the corner there. Hazel Hurley is doing a graphic harvest of the event today. And we also have some opportunities for you to engage with us as an audience. So we're going to do some Mentimeter work as well. Now, this is all beyond me in terms of technology and all the rest of it. So I'm very much being helped here by Hazel and Denise and Ellen and Devidas in the background. So if you have any questions or difficulties or anything, you can pop them in the chat there. As the first citizen of the city, we must introduce the Lord Mayor, Councillor Colm Kelleher, who I'm very delighted is joining us today to welcome you all, and I suppose to set us off on the right journey, in the right place. So over to you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Catherine, and good morning to you all. My apologies that we were having severe technical difficulties in the office here this morning, but we got here in the end. As Lord Mayor and first citizen of Cork City, I'm delighted to be with you here today to welcome everyone to this online event, which will focus on a growing city, which includes the needs, rights and participation of our youngest citizens, to help them feel connected, to grow and to flourish. The response across the board to this event demonstrates the eagerness of the people who support this initiative. And I would like to extend a particular warm Cork welcome to the contributors near and far, and thank you for sharing your expertise and experiences with us here this morning. Looking forward to that. As the chair of today's event, Catherine Harford, also chairs the Cork Child Friendly City Working Group on behalf of Cork Healthy Cities. The Healthy Cities Action Plan adopted by Council in 21 named the Child Friendly City as a key action for the next 10 years. The Child Friendly City initiative can build on the progress made by significant programmes of work which include and which we in Cork take immense pride in: the Healthy Cities, Learning Cities, Playful Cities, amongst others. Cork City has been invited to take part in the Urban 95 programme, run in conjunction with London School of Economics, which asks urban leaders and planners and designers and also managers if you could experience the city from the height of a 3-year-old. What would you do differently? This event today will add to learning what we need to do to improve our experience of our children and young people and for those who care for them. We can learn from partner cities and experts in multitudes of different fields, from parents to caregivers and from children themselves. As representative of the city's citizens of Cork and of the elected councillors of Cork City Council, I recognise the value of building a civic and public awareness engagement. This is something that I know the Child Friendly City Working Group is also committed to doing. I know that City Hall will continue to support this initiative and listen to the experiences and ideas which are shared with us here today and into the future. 2022 will see a review of Cork's local economic and community plan and the finalisation of our city's development plan. Director of Services and Community Culture and Placemaking, Adrian Rogers, is participating today, and we hope that work being undertaken by groups like this will contribute to these important policy developments. I wish to thank you and the hosts of today's Child Friendly Cities Working Group for bringing the event together, and I wish you a productive and inspirational conversation today and continued success with this important work. One thing that struck me there in what I said is it experienced the city from the height of a 3-year-old. And I can remember very vividly my own daughter when she was about 4 years of age, and we were in the regional park in Ballincollig. And I remember asking her that very question, what's it like to be so small? And I actually walked around the bank of the river for around 10 minutes. They must have thought I was a lunatic on my knees. to be at a level with her. So it's something that I can personally connect with. But again, thank you for the invitation. I wish you every success today, and I look forward to reading the report. Unfortunately, I will not be staying with you. I do have another engagement in another part of the city, so I do have to go now. But again, on behalf of the elected members of Cork City Council and the people of Cork, Bear Bua, I was going to read in Tallaght.
Thank you so much, Lord Mayor, for that wonderful introduction and welcome. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I suppose we were all children once. We're parents, caregivers, educators. So we all have an interest in this. And I think this, I suppose, if we get it right for children, we get it right for everyone. I think that is what I'm taking from the learning that I'm certainly, what we're learning from this already. So thank you so much for that connection. Wonderful, thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to the audience now, to you all here. What we would like you to do before we get into the nuts and bolts and things is to ask you, what do you think a child-friendly city is? So we're putting up a link to a Mentimeter, which will be in the chat function. And the question is, what is a child-friendly city? So if you could perhaps think of 3 words, maybe each, and add them into the Mentimeter code, so kind of action words or describing words. And together we will build a collective kind of thought from our perspective as to what a child-friendly city is. So we're going to just give that a few minutes, if that's okay. There is the link. And you should, I think we can see the slide as well where it'll be generated. Well, it's working, so that I'm very impressed already. That's fantastic. That's amazing. Great words coming out there. Pieces in. Oh, I love the word green, loving, caring, listening, accessible, welcoming, playful, exciting. Some of the words are too small. I can't see them. Clean, responsive. We'll get that in for you, Kieran. Yeah. Respectful, freedom, fun, safe and carefree. Safety is coming up there quite a bit as well. Safe spaces, not scary. I saw open, inclusive. It's still moving. You have a lot to contribute. It's really important. Happy, inclusive for all, voices included. Okay, so it's still kind. We'll make sure all those words go in that you're adding in the chat as well. I mean, that's a pretty clear statement from me. I think we're all on the same page here. And it kind of puts what we do in our work in Let's Grow Together. You're really thinking about relationships and the environments in which children, and they're kind of one of the same. So it's that kind of relational aspect and interactive and inclusive. So that's fantastic. Okay. So that might be keep generating in the background. I'm just going to put up a couple of slides myself. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you, luckily we have Professor Laura Lundy with us here today, who's going to explain much more about the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and participation. But I suppose it was important to have the UNICEF definition of a child-friendly city to set the scene for us. So here we have the definition, and I suppose a child-friendly city is a town, a city or a community or any system of local governance. And I think that's really important, so we can think about our smaller neighbourhoods and our smaller communities as well as the city as a whole, committed to improving the lives of children within their jurisdiction by realising their rights as articulated in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's a city, town or a community in which the voices, needs, priorities and rights of children are an integral part of public policies, programmes and decisions. So I think we're thinking about these things in that context. So as was already said, child-friendly cities is part of the Healthy Cities 10-year action plan. And I just wanted to run through some of the pieces that are already in place in the background. First of all is we have a working group established. It's very open, so anyone can join us out of this today. If you're interested in joining us, we'd be delighted to hear from you. We have the Healthy Cities represented, Nagonagle Place, Cork Migrant Centre, City Council, the HSE, UCC, MTU, ourselves in Let's Grow Together, the Rainbow Club, the Guards, Traveller Visibility Group, the Glucksman, Playful Paradigm, Pedestrian Cork, TUSA Child and Family Agency, in particular the Children and Young People Services Committee, the Cork Sexual Health Centre and Cork City Childcare Committee. So we have been meeting and talking ourselves, and now we're at the stage to move this on to speak to others. We've been meeting with UNICEF in Ireland and the European offices, and we attended, Dr. Shirley Martin and Dr. Aoife Daly have been building the links for us with Liverpool, who are here today and have attended some of their meetings. We've made links with other cities as well. I suppose through this call, we've linked in with Derry Strabane, who are here today, who's represented by Claire Lynch, who is the Children and Young People's Coordinator there. And we've also engaged with the funding stream and possibility of participation in the DCYA training and coaching programme, which will be developed this year. We've been exploring research opportunities, and we did make a big submission to the draft city development plan to give a focus on to enhance the focus on children, which in fairness is there. And you can review that submission on the Healthy Cities website. As the Lord Mayor discussed there, Cork City Council have a team, including myself actually. I'm very honoured to be part of it, participating in the Urban 95 Academy with colleagues in the council as well. And that's a really interesting initiative to help us to learn how to design cities, as the Lord Mayor said, from the height of a healthy 3-year-old, which really turns your thinking upside down, I must say. And then we have this learning and connecting event today. Some of the next steps that we'll be engaged with is obviously the engagement and participation of children. That is absolutely key to this, and I suppose we want to learn how to do that well and properly first. And I suppose the next thing then would be about stakeholder and asset mapping. So what is already happening in the city, who are important to the lives of children, who are the stakeholders, and how do we build an action plan which is based on what we already have, which is significant, and also moving from an informal structure of people talking together and planning together towards a formal structure. So there's some of the things that we'd like to be moving towards in the next little while. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. And so at this point, I think it's we'll continue the kind of context in the Cork arena as such. And I'm really delighted, I suppose, to introduce to you Adrienne Rogers, who's with us today. Adrienne is the Director of Services for Community, Culture and Placemaking in Cork City Council, where she has been for a number of years now. And prior to that, she worked as Head of Enterprise with the Local Enterprise Office in Cork City, and has a huge amount of significant experience in the development delivery of supports in the enterprise sector. And I suppose the department that you're directing at the moment, Adrienne, has a huge scope and the real shift towards placemaking, which is really significant. So, and we really recognise the partnership that the council are bringing to this. So I'm delighted to welcome you, Adrienne.
Thanks very much, Catherine, and thank you all. And it's great to be here this morning. My name is Adrienne Rogers and I'm Director of Services for Community, Culture and Placemaking in Cork City Council. And when people hear that title, a lot of people say, so what is that? What does it do? Well, we were christened a couple of years ago when we were established as the Ministry of Fun. And I say to people, fun can be very hard work. But I do notice that one of the most important and key items that came up on that infogram there was, I mean, it was fun, you know, because we're talking about children. So look, we're where we should be, I suppose. So thanks for having me along this morning. And I won't keep you too long. I suppose I see myself as the starter and there's a kind of main course and dessert coming. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what all the other speakers have to say. So I suppose just for the time that's in it, I just want to say to everybody here today, well done. Well done for the work everyone is doing, but more importantly, for the collective response to COVID over the last 2 years. I know many of us have experienced loss of various kinds, be it our freedom, our confidence, our ability to engage, and worst of all, I suppose, our loved ones. While we're not out of the woods yet, it does look as though we are on the journey and each and every one of us should be proud of our efforts. And I didn't want to let this morning go without actually acknowledging that. And of course, I suppose these efforts include supporting our children and young people to build their resilience for this awful period, but hopefully into the future where they will become strong and resilient adults to deal with whatever life challenges throw at them. And I think as parents and grandparents, as brothers and sisters, I think that's a job for all of us. So that child-centric, I suppose, view, I think is really important. So Cork City Council is delighted to be a part of the Cork Friendly Cities Steering Group and to support the development of Cork City as a child-friendly city. As many of you are already aware, Cork City received its current World Health Organization Healthy Cities designation in April of last year. As part of the preparation for that designation, a 10-year Cork Healthy Cities Action Plan was developed by all the interagency and community partners and launched by the then Lord Mayor. We in Cork City Council are committed to supporting the delivery of the Healthy Cities Action Plan, of which child-friendly cities is one of the strategic goals. Cork aspires to deliver opportunities to achieve the 5 national outcomes for children and young people. And we embrace the vision as set out in Better Outcomes and Brighter Futures. And to quote, for Ireland to be one of the best small countries in the world in which to grow up and raise a family, and where the rights of all children and young people are respected, protected and fulfilled, where their voices are heard and where they are supported to realise their maximum potential now and into the future. A child-friendly city is one which implements the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child at local level. The ultimate goal of a child-friendly city is one in which there is a system of local governments which is committed to fulfilling the rights of the child. A child-friendly city is a city or community where children's voices, needs and rights are integrated as much as possible into the laws, policies, regulations, programmes and budgets at local level. But most important of all, I believe that a child-friendly city must become a culture where we treasure our children, because if we don't, then what kind of future are we building for this country and its citizens? Embedding culture will take a long time, but every journey begins with a single step, and we have now started this voyage. Community culture and placemaking actively works with communities and organisations right across the city through partnerships to promote, develop and enhance Cork as a city. We're actively driving and working towards Cork becoming a trauma-sensitive city, which aligns with the goals of a child-friendly city. And any of you that might have been involved in any of the sessions in relation to trauma sensitivity will understand that. For anyone who is not yet engaged in this initiative, I would really encourage you to do so. Cork is a UNESCO learning city. And as a city, we're actively promoting access to education for all through the Learning Cities Network and Cork Access Network. Through the Playful Paradigm, we're delighted to partner to build a city that promotes play and the importance of play in our lives, where we bring young and old together to enjoy learning through play. During COVID, our sports and sustainability section developed the concept of sports on the green. Primarily aimed at young people, we took all sorts of sports greens outside people's homes, so the children could engage while being safe and outdoors. And these included soccer, rugby, cricket, and Zumba, to name but a few. This concept was presented at a recent Regional Cities UN conference, and people were really intrigued and interested in this initiative. It's really simple, but it really works and it gets out into the locals, so the local communities, and I love the concept and the idea, and we're continuing to grow it. So one of our most popular events every year in the cultural section is Pranún and Og, which many of you are probably already familiar with. And this initiative didn't stall during COVID, but it actually grew. So our engagement with schools and with children through community groups and into the homes, that base actually grew during COVID, which is great, and we'll hope to build and develop on that as we're going forward. So a little plug here, on the 17th of March, we're going to have a St. Patrick's Day parade after 3 years of the gap. I'm encouraging everybody here, get out on the streets and celebrate. If you are involved in any community groups at local level, please encourage them to do something for the parade. We're not looking for flash or, you know, the most expensive floats, or we just want people. We want people on the streets and we want people participating. So encourage any community groups to get involved in contact for arts and cultural sector. So going forward, what do we need to do? Well, I don't think anybody would argue that partnerships and collaboration are key to driving change and improving our city to be the best it can. The Cork Local Economic Community Plan, which is currently being revised, has identified 15 high-level themes. However, a number of the themes facilitated the cross-pollination of ideas and opportunities. And these were ideas such as the healthy city, safe and green cities, social economies, education and learning, social inclusion and equality, children and young people, and quality of place. I think it's also important to point out that Cork was one of the only cities in Ireland that retained and prioritised the rapid areas within the city for investment and development, again in partnership with the Rapid Area Based Committee and the Local Community Development Committee. Ambitious goals can be achieved, but only by us working, learning and growing together. I'm looking forward to hearing from the other cities here today about their journey towards becoming a child-friendly city. It's an ambitious goal that we have, but a worthwhile challenge for Cork City, so that we can embrace as we continue to grow and learn. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, Adrienne. Thank you very much for those comments. And I suppose something that really struck me there is this idea of culture. So it's yes, we can make a lot of physical, adaptations or enhancements, but it's about a kind of a mindset and a way of being and a way of thinking. And I think that is such an important kind of way to think about this, I think. So I really appreciate that. And another comment you made there was around better outcomes, brighter futures, the national framework for children. And I see a lot of our TUSLA colleagues on the call today, and I think it's a framework they would be very familiar with, but no more than the health service not being the only people responsible for people's health, the Child and Family Agency can't support children by themselves. This happens in the context of everybody important to children's lives. So it's really great to hear somebody representing the council to reference that framework as well. So these things matter across sectors. And so I suppose leading on from there, we have some representation here now from, I suppose, the arts sector, which is another important part of this picture. And you also mentioned the rapid areas there. So a lot of what we're trying to do is think about inclusion of children who are seldom heard, who perhaps don't have a voice in the mainstream, and also in a planning context. So what I want to introduce now is a piece of work led with the Glucksman UCC. I know Helen Lynch is here today and was very much involved as well, and Denise in the Freedom of the City project. So we're going to send a link now, and Tig, if you're here, we might just show the video first, and if you would like to make a few comments for us following the video. So we're just going to put that up now, and hopefully that will work for you.
Freedom of the City was a project by the Glucksman Gallery that invited over 2,000 children to contribute to the Cork City Development Plan. In partnerships with the UCC and Cork City Council, the Glucksman have put together a city-wide creative programme that helped us to express our ideas for healthier, greener and more playful cities. This film tells the story of how that happened.
Freedom of the City has created an opportunity for young people to get involved with Cork City Council and to picture and express how they would like to see their city develop into the future. As a society, it is crucial that we include and listen to the voice of our young people. Their ideas and proposals about Cork's development invite us to consider current planning practices and imagine a positive future for our city. I have been struck by the wonderful vision that they have for Cork that promotes a living environment built on inclusivity and well-being. We have seen a clear message from the young people of Cork that they want a city that places nature to the fore. This strong emphasis on developing our city to be a shared space with wildlife is presented to us in a variety of fun ways. The consistent message is that a city that prioritises nature and prioritises the health and well-being of its citizens. I'm excited to see how this Cork City Development Plan reflects the innovative ideas of our young citizens.
For the most part, we worked collectively. We had like a sheet in the middle of the table, and we talked about what we like about Cork and what we don't like about Cork, and what we'd like to change or keep the same.
In my picture, I added a ton more trees, because even though in Cork, in most places there's a ton of trees and there's loads of forests, but I feel like towards the centre of the city there could be a lot more greenery and grass.
If I was Lord Mayor of Cork, I would make the streets more colourful and then play music in the streets to make a bit more, a nicer atmosphere.
As a university art museum, we have a very special role to play in connecting the vibrant research that happens here on campus and ensuring that it has a real impact in the city where we live. During spring 2021, primary, second level and third level students had an opportunity to explore, using digital activities online, the creative ideas that they want for their city.
I'd really love to have more spaces for like informal learning for young people, like open spaces that you can freely go into and learn new skills and things like that.
We learn lots of things in school and that's great, but also if we went on more outings and everything to museums and other learning spaces, it might be more of a fun experience and we might want to learn more.
The sort of work we do with young people, I suppose, often revolves around empowering them to have their own voice and have their own say. We work a lot with kids that might be from marginalised communities or minority groups. So the themes of belonging and inclusion come up quite frequently. And then using creativity to help them to express themselves.
So for the Freedom of the City project, we used digital media. The internet is a place where young people feel comfortable. It allows us to reach bigger audiences. Young people can engage from the comfort of their own space.
So the idea with Healthy Cities is that we work in collaboration. We never do anything on our own. Really, the process of how we work together and that collaboration and that growing, I suppose, of expertise across different organisations is really essential for health promotion. Collaboration brings a greater knowledge and understanding of health, and it leads to really positive outcomes. This is a fantastic example of such a collaboration where the expertise is here in the Glucksman in terms of engaging with children. The planning expertise is in the local authority, and then the playful element came through from the playful paradigm. So bringing all of these expertises together has lent itself to this wonderful partnership and fantastic outcomes that we can see here from children, with the schools engaging also, and parents and people at home engaging. So really, in a nutshell, this project, personifies what a Healthy Cities approach is, or a playful approach is to city development planning. And it's been a wonderful experience for us to observe this in practice.
If I was the Mayor of Cork City, I would put more electric car spots for electric cars for the climate.
I want more greener spaces, parks in your cities, cleaner rivers, and more rooftop gardening to utilise space.
It'd be nice if there's like cycle lanes so you could cycle to training like safely, so you don't have to drive or anything.
It'll also be better for us if we stop using cars, as well as being better for the environment. We can, do more exercise and it'll be more healthy for us.
Urban planning really is about making places for people, and in that there's so many things underpinning it. There's sustainable development, there's inclusiveness, making sure everybody is part of their city, and also having a say. Participating in the future of your city is so important. But really, mostly we're thinking about making livable places, places that are pleasant to live in, to walk around, to cycle around, nice places to go to work. Really a good city is a place that people want to be and not that they have to be.
I feel like aside from the art, a thing that the city would really need to implement is like more laws on litter, or more like community-run events about cleaning the city and cleaning the beaches, because it's like really impactful on not only our health but also the planet's health.
If we kind of just ignore it, sure, it won't be a nice place to live at all. But if we actually make impact on what's happening, we have to think, oh yeah, there's pollution everywhere, we need to really fix this. If we actually had a good mindset towards all of this, it would be such a nice city in a couple of years.
The drawings are just incredibly compassionate, and when you step away and it really gives you perspective to get into the mind of a child, because sometimes you forget what it's like to be 8, 9 and 10, and to be able to look into their minds and look at the creativity is something that really gives you hope, and that we should be listening to our young people and making the right decisions today in order to have a better future tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm really struck by the amount of colour, the colour in the images, and how that actually they've referenced colour, that they really want colourful buildings, and that just shows that kids are, they're perceiving their environment and they want fun and they want variety and they want something interesting and something exciting.
If I was Lord Mayor of Cork, I'd make the river cleaner. We'd have better advantage of it, so we'd be able to play in it more, and there'd be lots of trees and bushes and green areas. I'd also make it a better place to learn and play, and add learning stations around Cork where you could learn a bit about the history of Cork, or you could just learn some fun facts or stuff like that.
If there's less travelling and there's less cars on the road, it would be a safer space, there would be less pollution, and it would also be a lot quieter. If I was Lord Mayor of Cork, I would put more areas of greenery and places for people to relax.
If I was Lord Mayor for today, I'd like to make the city more inclusive for people with physical disabilities.
I'd have little parks where you can just kind of sit back and relax instead of all the loudness, and it'd have fairy lights and music, nice soft music constantly playing.
Well, the voice of young people is vital in terms of catering for their needs and what they'd like to see happening with the city. So they're the future, and their voice is really important, and it's also sort of written into the legislation that we hear from children and their voices in what they would like to see happening with the city. Also, I suppose, from looking at some of the pictures that they've drawn up, they really do have a great contribution to make, and they're very aware of the main issues affecting their city, such as the environment, parks and public spaces.
Essentially, the development plan will be the indicator or the guide for growth for Cork City over the next 6 years, but it takes a longer time framework right up to 2040. They're not going to be children, 5-year-old children or 10-year-old children who are going to read 700 pages and give us an informed written submission. It's never going to happen. But I think this allows us to quite clearly see what young people want. And if we step back as adults and look at what they're asking for, it'd be pretty cool that in 19 years' time, when they're all adults, that they've influenced Cork City to be better for young people.
I must say I find that really inspiring video, and just to congratulate everybody who is involved. One of the children there talked about a mindset, and it goes back to what Adrienne was talking about, a culture. It's a kind of shift in the way we think, and the children talking there about a sense of belonging and inclusion, and how space is really important to them, and the feeling of safety. And I think that's an internal feeling as well as an external feeling, which brings us back to the trauma sensitive city work as well, and the whole idea of greening and climate. And I suppose as we emerge out of COVID, children are going to be the generation that are going to live with I suppose the after effects of the pandemic for the longest, and issues which affect them and are important to them. We can really hear them talking about the climate, so I think there's an onus on us all to get to grips with that as well. Tig, are you there? Sorry, there's so many people here. I just wondered if you'd like to add a few comments, and I just want to welcome you. I should probably give you a formal introduction as the Senior Curator of Education and Community at the Glucksman, as part of UCC. Just if you wanted to add a few comments.
Yeah, thanks so much, Catherine. I'm delighted to be here this morning. I won't add too much because the video actually it kind of captures the project really nicely, and puts the voice of young people to the fore. And I guess the collaboration of the many agencies and organizations behind the Freedom of the City project, that was really our main goal, was to give an opportunity for young people to be heard and to ensure that their voices had influence. So influence in this setting around the Cork City Development Plan. Just to say, I suppose, for some of you who may not know, the Glucksman, we're a contemporary art museum based in University College Cork. And we have been for many years working with young people, inviting them to learn creative skills and to, I suppose, have a say on quite urgent themes. And we've kind of priority strands around climate, health and well-being, and equality and inclusion. So a lot of those themes were involved in really what we were proposing to the young people here. And what was slightly different around this project, of course, was COVID. And when we would ordinarily invite school groups to come into the museum and work with us and work with artists in the museum spaces, we had to design a model that actually would go out to schools and quite easily allow educators to roll this project out themselves without too much hassle and too much strain when they were already under so much pressure with everything going on. So we created these artist tutorial films that were guided by research that was taking place in UCC Planning Department in UCC, and we sent a worksheet as well, and they were very open worksheets. So that question of if I was Lord Mayor of Cork comes up repeatedly in that film. That was the central question. It was really about that kind of open-ended question would allow for a variety of responses from the young people. And so the educator rolled it out and sent us back the information. And key for us, the work we do with young people, is that we celebrate their creativity and give them that opportunity to have their work exhibited within the museum, which we did throughout the summer of last year. And we also gave them that red carpet moment. We worked with a local cinema and presented the documentary film, so they got to come and see themselves on big screen. And then the last and crucial part of the project was with our colleague Helen Lynch and research students in UCC occupational therapy, who analysed the artworks and the ideas that came back from young people and collated that information into a report that was submitted to the Cork City Development Planning consultation phase, so that actually their voice did go back in and would have the influence that we had set out in the origins of the project.
Super, thank you very much, Tig. And I see that Helen's put up the link to the full submission there. And I know the children mentioned if they were Lord Mayor for a day, and in the Child Friendly Cities submission to the development plan, we proposed a children's mayor for Cork City. So perhaps their wishes might come true one day, and we'd be delighted to support them in that. I'll just give a little shout out to all our kind of arts institutions in the city and museums as well, just as well as yourselves. I find, and you know, as a parent living in the city as well, these are really accessible institutions in the city, whether it's the Crawford, Nano Nagle as well, and the work that Danielle's doing around the culture trail for children. They're really exemplary, accessible ways of engaging children and thinking outside of the box and being so child friendly in the way that you all approach that work. And also just to recognise our support from our academic partners as well, who have really taught us in practice how to engage children, how to listen to children, how to influence our work and make it better as a result of that. And you know, and also people, organisations like TUSA providing training in participation as well. So we have a lot to build on, I think, already here, but I think it's important that we hear the kind of wider framework for that. And I suppose I'm really delighted to welcome back as well, because Laura Lundy, Professor Laura Lundy, has supported us previously in Let's Grow Together around children's rights and participation and bringing some context to that. Professor Laura Lundy is Professor of Children's Rights at UCC, a recent appointment, and also with Queen's University in Belfast. And I know very humbly you recognise that the title of the model of participation that's really been incorporated into the Department of Children, so a national policy framework, and also into the TUSA Child and Family Agency and into the UNICEF model, is the Lundy model of participation. So we're very delighted to have you join us today to introduce the concept of children's rights from the UN Convention on Children's Rights and move towards the model within the UNICEF framework as well. So we'll hand over to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Catherine. I'm really delighted to be here and I've really enjoyed the presentation so far and looking forward to the rest of the morning. Yeah, as Catherine said, yeah, I've recently been appointed at Cork and I'm delighted about that. This is almost my first official engagement and it's a lovely one to be at. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so I'm going to Catherine has asked me to do a bit of a general introduction to children's rights and then look specifically at children's right to be heard and my model. So I think many of you are already very familiar with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and of course Ireland, as well as every other UN member state apart from the United States of America, has ratified this convention, and that means that every public body should be implementing it. So these rights have to be implemented by all of us, including everyone who works, in the city for the children in the city. I was thinking just really brief, there's so many rights that are at play here. I mean, I could name many more, but these were the ones that seemed to me to be most relevant. What we really want, and it came up in the word cloud, is children's right to live in a city that respects their rights. And something funny happened as I was sitting getting ready for this talk. I moved desk and a little gift fell out of a drawer, and it was actually a gift from South Africa. And it's a bookmark from Nelson Mandela, and it's that really famous quotation which says, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." And it just seems so pertinent for a child-friendly city. So what is Cork's soul? What is the soul of the cities that we live in? And how should we treat our children? And that's where rights come in. This is where they come into their own, because they provide this universally agreed blueprint about how we should treat our children. And again, whenever we all engaged earlier on in producing the word cloud, the three things that come up: safe is a right, the right to be protected from harm. Fun isn't actually a right, although I think it would have been a right had it been had children drafted the convention, which I'll come to. But of course, it's a huge part of Article 31 in terms of play and inclusion, which I will come back to because I think it's so important. Article 2, enjoyment of every single right that children have. There should be non-discrimination, that we need to ensure that every child can enjoy a rights-respecting, child-friendly city. And then the other thing that struck me when I watched that amazing video, because it does interest me, and I've done some work on this, would the convention be different if children had drafted it, is one of my interests. And we know that it would. And one of the things that was really apparent that children mentioned time and time again in the existing work was about the environment and the planet and climate change. And yet this Convention on the Rights of the Child was the very first convention to mention the natural environment in Article 29, where children are entitled to be educated to respect it. But just last year, the UN for the first time acknowledged that there should be a right to a healthy environment. And the Committee on the Rights of the Child is currently consulting on that. It's going to draft a general comment, which is its guidance to the world about how we ensure a healthy environment. So it's so interesting to me that children prioritise that. So that's just some of the rights. What I'm going to concentrate on is a right that has been mentioned by children and by almost every adult so far, and that's the right for children to have their views sought and given due weight. And that's Article 12.1 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And it's so important in terms of delivering every single right, the safety, the fun and the inclusion, that it's considered to be a general principle. What does that mean? It means it's cross-cutting and that you can't actually deliver a rights respecting, a child-friendly city unless you listen to and take children's views seriously and into account in the decisions that you make. So the Committee on the Rights of the Child has clarified, and this is important for the work that you do, is that it's not just the right of individual children, the decisions that affect them, like perhaps where they live, who they live with, what they study, choices that are made for them, but crucially, it's a right of groups of children. When decisions that are made that affect children collectively, like planning, like resources in the city, that is also an entitlement. They're entitled to be consulted and their views taken into account collectively. It's a right of groups of children. Which decisions does it apply to? It isn't actually only limited to their rights. It actually says it's in all matters affecting them. And I love this comment from the Committee on the Rights of the Child that says they should be consulted where their perspective can enhance the quality of solutions. And again, going back to the video, because I think it's a hard act to follow, like so often what those children were suggesting was absolutely going to enhance the quality of living in Cork, not just for children, but for adults and everyone in the community, you know, to have it colourful and bright with green spaces and music playing and activities and learning is for everyone. Children can enhance the quality of our solutions. So for me then to explain, again, we've all used these terms, the voice of the child, the right to be heard, the right to have a say. I use them too, so don't feel criticised if you've used them to date. But one of my things that occurred to me going back some time now on the basis of my own work with children was that there's a worry about these terms because each of them is an abbreviation, a necessary abbreviation, potentially undermines the implementation of this incredibly important right, children's right to have their views sought and given due weight in accordance with age and maturity. So going back some years, I came up with this, what is now called the Lundy model, certainly wasn't called it then or by me. And I looked at Article 12 in the context of other important children's rights. It was trying to understand it using data from children and using my understanding as a lawyer about the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And what I argued then, and what has now become the model, is that voice is not enough. You know, it's not just enough to enable children to say what they think. We have to create spaces, we have to certainly give voice, but we also have to give audience and influence. And that really links to the second important part of Article 12, the right to have views given due weight, which is sometimes neglected. So this is the current, it's been used a lot and there's lots of people who have done, you know, wonderful diagrams, much better than my original one. This is the current one, which is pertinent here because it's from the new 2021 Irish National Framework on Child and Youth Participation, where I had the, you know, the luck and value to work with Hubna Nog and the department to come up with a really practical way of implementing it. And in the 4 things, and there's this, they've chosen a dial because I argue that there's a chronological order. We start by giving children space and we work our way through. Lots of you, I know, I recognize so many faces, which is great, have heard this model and have heard me presenting it many times. So I'm going to be very brief about this. I'm just going to briefly say about the 4 concepts and then show you some tools that can help to use it. In terms of space, we need to create those spaces. And again, we've just had a wonderful example from the Glucksman actively going out to find out what children want to say about their city. It has to be a safe space. And that's where we don't, you know, subject children to rebuke, dismiss them, or worse, reprisal, that when they say something they don't like, in some way they get punished for that. And crucially, and that came forward in your responses and from the children, it needs to be inclusive. And we always need to think who's not in. And the groups who are often not in, we know are children who are very young, children with disabilities, including children with learning disabilities. In the Irish context, children from the traveller community, and also children who do not speak English or the language or Irish, the languages of the country. Voice, firstly, children don't have to. Some children won't actually care about Cork-friendly cities, and we just have to acknowledge that. Lots of children will want to say what they think, and some children won't, and it's a right, not a duty. We shouldn't force them. Choice in the mode of expression, that is actually a right under Article 13 of the Convention. They can speak in a medium of their choice. Some children will love to draw, some children love to talk, some children like to do neither, some children, you know, will not want to talk at all. And sometimes silence even can be expression, and we need to be able to read that. This is important because it was very misunderstood at the time that I wrote the article. It's afforded to all children capable of forming a view. This right is not afforded to children who are capable of forming a sensible or mature view. The weight to be given to the view is in accordance with age and maturity, but a child is capable of expressing a view. They are entitled to be heard, and they may need help both to form, understand what the issues are, and then actually, give expression to their view, and the onus is on us to help them to do it. So a little brief stop for one of the big myths of child participation. Often very young children are left out. And we know, and this is why often we use baby memes ourselves, adults using baby memes to express powerful emotions. For instance, we know our babies are incredibly expressive. Our babies are using our services in every city. And there are ways in which we can perhaps observe to understand how they feel about those services, what works for them and what doesn't, and incorporate that into our decision making. So it's a myth to say they're too young. We need to understand the views of everyone who lives in Cork, including our very youngest. Second part of the model then is audience and influence. Audience is actually making sure that when you do the business of getting children's views, they get to the right decision makers. There might not be one audience for us in a rights perspective. The audience is the duty bearer. And those are the people who are making the decisions and have the power to make the decisions that affect children's lives. So that could be the people setting the budget. That could be the planners. That could be the who's delivering particular services, or it could be right down at the ground level with children. You need to identify the audience and be sure the children's views get to everyone who can impact on the child's decision. And finally, influence, which was mentioned. It's absolutely fundamental that children's views are given due weight. Back in the day, I settled, as many of us do, on ensuring there's a formal response. We cannot underestimate the significance of feedback, and that children really understand what has happened to their views, and not just when they're whenever they're getting what they want or they're influencing, but really crucially when they don't and they can't, and being realistic with children about what's possible and what is not possible, or how long that's going to take. But crucially, as I said then, we want to make sure we create conditions where you don't just gather children's views and do nothing, but that you make sure that there is really attentive engagement with children in a dialogue, and an ongoing dialogue, not your smash and grab, you take the views and disappear. That is crucial to a rights respecting response. Okay, just quickly then, to finish time, it's obviously become very well used. One of the people at the organizations who uses it, UNICEF, and they use it as part of the guidance for their child-friendly cities globally about how to talk to children. I love this diagram, which is from Jerison Lansdowne. I'll put a link into it in the chat when I finish, which puts my model into a bunch of other ways of understanding child participation. Mine is about the rights-based qualities. Others are about the forms and level of participation. So I've already mentioned the Irish National Child and Youth Participation Framework that I've worked on. It has fantastic toolkits that were developed with practitioners and probably some people in this room. This is a planning checklist for things like policies and plans, like a city plan. A new checklist, which is for us, those of us who are engaging with children, on a day-to-day basis. If you're working with children in your own childcare facility, in a school, in a service, this is the checklist, which takes the Lundy model concepts and translates them into really practical questions. And finally, a little checklist that was developed with children and young people themselves, where we can check if they feel heard, and these little statements I really like. And the one I'd really draw your attention to is under voice, the very last heading. When any work we've done with children, one of the things that they say they value most, of course, they want people who are listening and kind. We all want that. But they always say, I had enough time to talk. One of the things that children always want in us is patience. Adults are busy and often impatient. And if we're going to do this, we need to give children time. So finally, there's no one right way to do it. What works in Cork might not work in Belfast or Derry, where I was speaking to Derry yesterday. We need to be sure that what we're doing is child and context and decision specific, but there are a kaleidoscope of ways we can engage our children. And the one thing that is always the right way when we're engaging with children is to ask them themselves what they want to do, how they want to communicate, who they want to communicate to. So thank you very much for the opportunity to do an overall framework of child rights and child participation, and I look forward to the rest of the presentations.
Thank you so much, Laura. We're actually okay for time.
Ooh, did I rush it?
No, well, there is a lot to take in there. I mean, it's so comprehensive, and I think just if I could just sort of pull on you just for 1 second, just to think about, I suppose there is a lot in it, and there's lots of methodologies, and people like Dr. Shirley Martin and others have really helped us to find these kind of creative ways to include children's voice and influence what we're doing, which is really wonderful. But I mean, I suppose sometimes we all get a bit concerned about that idea of tokenism. And I just wondered if you could kind of make a comment about that. You know, we want to include children of course, in this initiative. But we don't want to put children in a position where it feels tokenistic to them or to others. So I just wondered,
I'd love to say
add to that.
Just briefly, I'd love to say something tokenistic, because I take a kind of controversial view in that in recent years. And I've written a paper where I'm saying in defense of tokenism, which I haven't a lot of time to say, but what I want to say to you is we should never use the defense of tokenism to do nothing. I feel really strongly about that we've intimidated some people out of the space because they're afraid of being tokenistic. And what I often say is tokenism and I define it differently, could be a start. You know, that I think if you go into a process and you're genuinely interested in engaging with children and you genuinely want to take their views seriously, it is not tokenistic. It's a start, and you can learn from that start and go on and move on. There's no form of participation I've ever seen, and I've seen some brilliant ones, that's ever perfect. You know, we're always learning in our own work and what we're doing, and I just want everyone to feel that they can start. They can start and they can learn, and then we can ask children how we can do better. That said, I don't want you to be tokenistic, and one of the things that that's why I'm really focusing lately on feedback. I mean, the ways in which we stop tokenism, of course, is to ensure that people understand the right, and that's where the Lundy model is helpful. We want to understand that they have the resource and training to know what that means and how to put it into practice. That's another way of avoiding tokenism. But my own work, I've really emphasized that this feedback as the critical juncture. I think you're much less likely to be tokenistic when you commit to taking children's views seriously, and then you have to go back and stand in front of them and be accountable to them as to what you do. And so when I'm doing work with adult decision makers now, I make them commit to what I call a duty bearer audit, where they have to answer a series of questions, including the Committee on the Rights of the Child, you know, that they're going to go back and tell children responses, not just, thank you so much, your views are really important to us, we're going to take them seriously. No more of that. We're going to seriously and meaningfully engage, and we're going to transparently respond to them. That's how to avoid tokenism.
Yeah. And one other thing I took from your presentation there is it's a process, isn't it? Now, it's a learning journey is one aspect, but the participation and voice and inclusion of it is a process. It's a journey. It's almost like a constant loop, I think, is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
No, I think that's why it's quite useful. Initially, I wasn't so sure about it when the department decided to present the Lundy model as a dial. You know, that's not how we'd done it before, and I wasn't sure. But actually, to be fair, I think that's what came back from the feedback, that it shows that it goes round and round. So you go back, and you know, there's influence, and you start again. You know, so that it actually captures in some ways the ongoing relationship. And one last thing, I have a minute that I didn't say because I didn't know if I had time. I just want to speak, because I know this is great work that you do, Catherine, in your centre, and that, you know, real shout out to very early and young children. And I'm so struck by the Lord Mayor getting down on his knees with his 3-year-old. Like, good strategy. There's something costs little money in to really understand it. And there's wonderful work has gone on across the world in that. But I particularly love the work that was done years and years ago by Melbourne's in their city plan. By a colleague of mine, Kylie Smith, who's a professor at the University of Melbourne, who ran the nursery as well. And she just did fantastic work walking around the city with the toddlers. And one of the things that she always talked about was when they got to the crossings, and the beeping that goes on in the crossings, the little ones just said they hated the crossings because the urgent sound started too quickly for their little feet, you know, and they thought they weren't going to make it, and they stressed out when it started going beep, 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 beep. And actually that was then Melbourne, committed to adding seconds to the crossings. And of course, universal design, because it isn't just, little toddlers that find it hard to get across quickly, older people, others, so I just think, engaging with our youngest can make an incredible city for us all.
Of course, yeah. That's a really, and we'll have to find those links and make those, and just one final comment, I suppose, is the right to participation exists in parallel to the other rights. So, I'm thinking here there are children where we think about their participation and voice, but perhaps, they're going to school without breakfast this morning, or, their housing circumstances are insecure, and all. So their right to survival and protection and development, I suppose, sit with the right to participate. And even though, I don't know if you have a comment or a kind of observation around how it all fits together.
No, I do echo that, and absolutely all rights we say are indivisible, interrelated and interdependent. And clearly, when right to an adequate standard of living, along with the right to education, I think, and health, are the three that in some ways really underpin it all. If a child's not enjoying any of those three rights, everything else can fall. So I think you're right. So it's so crucial that we get those right, particularly so that we can enable everything else. But they're all interrelated. There's no question about that.
Laura, I could talk to you all day, to be honest, and I'm sure there's a bit of conversation in the chat and maybe some questions. And if we could use your presentation, we'll put that on the Healthy Cities website with our other resources, and we'll carry the conversation on at another time. So thank you very much, Laura, for joining us. Wonderful to have you. Okay, so we're going to, we have such a packed schedule, and just to acknowledge, we have been slightly disrupted in our agenda by COVID, but we actually had such a packed agenda anyway, so we're going to keep going now. We've mentioned Derry there. We're going to come back to Derry at a later point, who have started their journey toward child-friendly cities. First of all, we're going to hear from the city of Belfast, and Anne McCusker is the Healthy Cities Programme Manager and Coordinator in Belfast, which is the partnership organisation that has the responsibility for implementing the World Health Organisation city requirements for the city of Belfast. And I must say, this is a pretty impressive setup in Belfast. I've seen the journey over the last 10 years in parallel with our own in Cork City. And I know you've done significant work around including children to influence and to participate in policy making as well. And Anne is also a member of the Phase 7 WHO Advisory Committee for the Healthy Cities Network, so it's a European network, and is leading the development of health literacy programme, which is interesting, relevant for children as well, and supports health inequalities and health ageing programs. So again, put in the context of child-friendly cities as having a positive impact through the life course of people living, working and growing in cities. I could continue on, very impressive CV, Anne, but I'm going to pass over to you, and perhaps you could introduce yourself and take up your presentation. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be part of today's seminar. I mean, already I'm really inspired by the speakers before me and what you're already doing in Cork. And Denise, our colleague in the Healthy Cities Network, has been very generous to share the work that you're doing. So it has really inspired us on our journey too. What I'm going to do is share my presentation and hopefully give you an idea of our journey so far in terms of the child-friendly cities work. And it is a journey we're on, and we're continually updating and developing our work. So as Catherine introduced, I am with Belfast Healthy Cities. We've been a member of the Healthy Cities Work European network since the beginning, 1988. And this is just a map of the Healthy Cities Network, and you'll be familiar with the work that's happening in Cork and the expanse of the network and the reach. And I suppose one of the unique parts of it is that all of the member cities are coming to it at a different time on topics and different levels of experience, and it's very much about learning and sharing, and it covers a vast population across WHO Europe. We first began our work in 1998 on child-friendly cities under the auspices of healthy urban environments. So I suppose the uniqueness of the Healthy Cities Network is that it allows cities to work on emerging public health themes at a really early stage and directly engage with WHO for the expertise that they provide, and to link together with cities across Europe and on our own islands that we possibly wouldn't been able to engage with before. So it's a fantastic network. Here we go. So here is Belfast, a population of about 333,000 in the city. And then for the greater Belfast area, it's about 579,000. A relatively young city, by all standards, are about 20% of our population would be under 15. So it's really important to have this focus on child-friendly cities, because they're such a huge part of the population. But we did see a gap in the policy area that engaged directly with children and young people. Our board of directors are made up of our senior colleagues in public health. We're funded through the Public Health Agency, the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, Belfast City Council and the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. So taking a really rounded approach to health and looking at the wider determinants. And certainly the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child was a key driver in looking at children's access to good and supportive environments, and also their right to be heard in decisions that affect them. And that certainly relates to the built environment and that link between the place where you live or grow or work or play and its impact on your health. And I suppose just through observation by walking around the city centre, there were very few places for children specifically designed for their needs, and that automatically eliminates families from the city centre too. And I think now more than ever, it's important to look at how our city centres and our main streets and our high streets are changing, and how they now have to be more than just a retail provision or a nighttime economy, and how it can bring a sense of a place for people and everything that it would include. I really enjoyed watching the video that the children that was put together. There's nothing that I could disagree with. But their vision and idea of a city or a place is exactly what I want to experience too. So I think by focusing on our children, we do make an inclusive space for all, and that would be the focus on our work on older people as well. Where, and I think Laura mentioned, a fantastic participation framework, and I'm eager to look at that to see what we can learn from the approach that you have developed already. So what we wanted to do was look initially at the city centre, looking at our local development plan. How does it create spaces and places for children and young people and families, and very importantly then also the different neighbourhoods across Belfast. The children are dispersed evenly right across, maybe higher numbers in north and west, but how do these areas also support children in their day-to-day activities? So what we did first of all, going back to 2011, was look at pop-up play events and ways that we could create places for children to engage and play creatively or just interact with each other, and also then work with families and young people that were attending the events, and to ask them what they would like, what should be created in the spaces, what should be made available. So over a course of a number of years, we spoke to about 7,000 people, and we held events mostly in the city centre, at a culture night and pop-up events at the City Hall and even within our local shopping centres as well, to try to get a variety of people, a variety of opinions, and to see where would be the best and most sustainable way to take forward this way of engaging and supporting children in the city centre. So it just gives you an idea. There were very free activities that they could creatively use and building blocks and interact. And what we went on then to do was to develop a strategic framework which engaged children, about 400 children aged 8 to 11, so our key stage 2. And it was initially class-based sessions exploring the topic of healthy environments. What did that mean? How could they observe their local area? And what would they like to change? And so it was going out on a walk around the area, taking photos. Back in the day when we used disposable cameras and we printed out our photos, and I think now they're upgraded to iPads. But it was putting together that project of what they saw and what they wanted to change, and really making that link between health and place. And then they presented their ideas to local policymakers. So it was having that conversation, giving them their voice, but also trying to influence change as well. And I suppose really importantly, it was looking at that structured way that children could have that conversation in the classroom or in their local area around place and health and what they could do. We also introduced the Spectrum tool, and we worked with schools, primary and post-primary, and we had a working group with a range of partners right across health and place and statutory agencies. And we used the Spectrum tool that was developed in the University of the West of England with Marcus Grant and Hugh Barton, and to look at a way of assessing a very easy engagement tool around assessing the built environment and what worked and what didn't work. And then I suppose it was really just listening to the schools and the teachers. And what they said is this is something that they would like to have on an ongoing basis, and to look at this as part of their curriculum. And it fitted very well with the world around us. We mapped it against the Northern Ireland curriculum and saw how it could integrate into the themes that they were already delivering. It gave them an evidence-based way of having that conversation, and also was cross-curricular skills in terms of critical thinking, teamwork, problem solving. And we piloted it across 30 schools in Northern Ireland. So it was quite extensive in terms of the feedback that we got, the work that we did to take on board the changes that were suggested by the teachers and the children. And so, what we have now is a series of 7 units that looks at introducing place, exploring the environment, and really allowing them to come up with a project to create change and present it to their elected members. And the projects could be within their school grounds or within their local area. And many of the things, the children, excuse me, were asking for were very similar to what the children in Cork wanted. So it's not swimming pools in the sky and skate parks. It was green open spaces, some were clean, and better walking and cycling facilities and traffic management. So that idea of safety on their route to school, green and open spaces where they could play with other children, where they could socialise safely, and have a level of independence as well. So again, themes that are coming up right across and are important to people of all ages as well. And the Delivering Change booklet was developed really to highlight the change that could occur and inspire other schools that might be delivering it as well. So we promote it on an ongoing basis. We were linking in with the Royal Town Planners Association as well, and they provided a grant that allowed schools to develop some proposals and create change. But other schools came back to us and said that it was really a lever for them to access funding, either small pots of funding to create community gardens. And so you're going across issues of growing your own food and seeing where food comes from and the food change, accessing green spaces. So learning so much more about your environment and healthy places. And it allowed, I suppose it was also creating a lasting legacy for the children involved in the process, and also seeing how they could improve their local environment as well. And something that was really a place of beauty, and also that they could interact together in social activities. And then others were really successful in accessing large amounts of money, huge grants to create outdoor classrooms and play spaces. So it was interpreted and used in different ways by different schools, all through exploring place and health. So some of the really great achievements from that was the partnership working. It was that opportunity to work across sectors. And I suppose, that's the role of Healthy Cities, to bring people together, to collaborate. We don't, as Denise said at the start, we don't do anything on our own. It is absolutely about making those connections and creating the opportunity for schools to work with the private sector, to work with your elected members, and right across. And that's something that has lasted, those changes, given children and child-friendly spaces greater visibility and also importance, and the need to include that in the development of places and spaces. And then pushing forward of the common agenda of the built environment, and how that really impacts on health and well-being, and how we look at the wider conversation of reducing car dependency, creating spaces where children can have a level of independence or commute safely to school, and allowing, I suppose, the healthy choice to be the easy choice. And then also, I suppose, sharing our learning and best practice. And again, that was through RTPI, one of their awards for health and well-being. We were commended in that, but it's also sharing it across the network of Healthy Cities. And the resource has been translated and used across the network, but also used as a way of teaching English in some of the other cities. And we were delighted one of the schools from Greece that had used the programme came and presented their findings and their work in Belfast as well. So it's about creating those connections too. The resource is available freely online on our website, and there's a series of videos that take you through the use and development of it as well. So please look on our website and access it. It's there, and it can be mapped against any curriculum and is applicable for children 8 to 11, so really useful resource. I suppose in our journey of developing the schools resource, we also want to share our learning. So the engagement guidelines document was developed to really highlight the engagement methods that we use, the different variety of other pop-up events or questionnaires, or working directly with schools to survey them and getting the ideas from children and the pros and cons of each. So the audience was for both anyone engaging with children and policy makers, and a way of guiding engagement as we go forward. And there's no one way, there's a variety of ways, and you learn as you go what will suit best the group you're working with. And then we also develop the Design in Places for Children and Young People design guidelines that really work with planners, and we've had really good feedback on that. We worked with an urban designer who authored that piece of work, and it was looking at some of the design guidelines, and it has been used, I suppose, to inform planning decisions too, which is really useful, that there's positive feedback on it, that it's useful and usable. And when we were delighted to include a case study from Cork Healthy Cities too, and the playful paradigm. And also other work that we're looking at, the place standard tool, the use of it's been developed for a child-friendly version and should be available very soon. So another tool that we can use. And I suppose all of this was also in response to our local development plan, which is up this year for comment, and we hope to engage children and young people in the proposals that are put forward in the consultation. Our work continues really to implement the things that children are talking about. So we had a road safety week, and it was about engaging children from 4 local schools to think about their route to school and how they would safely get there. So now we're developing the Walking Buses initiative with 4 primary schools in an area to see how we can get children to and from school. And it links with other initiatives that are happening in the area. The Department for Infrastructure Minister initiated the 20-mile-per-hour zone around all schools in Northern Ireland. So that really lends itself to promoting active travel on the route to school. And we'll look at the safety element of children getting to school and what are the preferred routes as well. We're doing some work to reimagine some of the alleyways and the natural routes that children would take from home to school. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the work that we've done and the work that we are continuing to do. And if there's any comments or questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And there's a lot of information on our website too. So I can.
Thank you very much. And the resources are incredible that you have produced there. And one thing that really strikes me about it's the idea of children having a free and independent childhood. So the freedom to move. I was watching a TED talk by Tim Gill yesterday, and how much over 100 years our children's sort of place in which they move has reduced their independent space. So, to a matter of meters from the house. Yeah. Whereas 100 years ago, it would be kind of, sort of 20 kilometers or something. So at the age of 8. So, these kind of so bringing the idea of freedom and movement back into children's lives and reducing the stress of kind of car zones and things like this in their lives, but also the impact that has on their relationships in doing that. So it allows them to have healthy relationships with the adults around them and vice versa. So you're kind of creating a cohesion for everybody by making small changes for children. So and you have developed the resources to do that. So I think that's really interesting. And you can also see the knock-on health benefits of that as well. So all credit to you. And there's a lot of learning there, I think, for us. But I do think people in Cork can recognise some of these initiatives that are being led by maybe health promotion or the libraries or through the active travel strategy. So it's just about kind of bringing them together, isn't it, and making a bigger impact. So.
Absolutely. I think the feedback from the schools when we initially started to work with them, the teacher said, this is absolutely something that we would be delighted to work on, but we need that evidence base, that structured program, so we can ensure that we're giving the right messages. So it provides the structure, but it's just ongoing engagement and having that conversation and creating the opportunities for all partners to work together. And to see change as well, that's really important. You don't want there to be a sense of contribution and nothing changing, but I think the call is being made from different angles. So we have our green agenda, and we are starting a new program, Green in the City, so we're very much learning work, but we've updated our schools resource to look at what does biodiversity mean, how do we include active travel, and health literacy, and the importance of green and blue space as well. So
that's great, Anne. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you in the near future again. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on now, and thank you for your patience. The City of Liverpool have joined us, and through my limited historical knowledge, I do know the connections between Cork and Liverpool are very strong, and indeed Belfast, actually, in terms of the development and the history of the cities. And so I think, and something very important to us within the Liverpool experience is that they have set off on a journey with UNICEF UK to develop child-friendly cities under that particular framework, which we are looking at and exploring ourselves. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Caroline O'Neill, who has joined us here. Caroline is the Families Programme and Liverpool Child Friendly City Project Manager at Liverpool City Council. Caroline has over 18 years experience of working in local government and partners including schools, health services, the voluntary sector, and covers a range of roles in those sectors. And most recently is the programme management for children's services in the City of Liverpool. So we're very aware we have different organisational structures for children in our different jurisdictions, but that said, we have an incredible amount to learn, and she will be joined by her colleague Caroline Scott, who's the Youth Engagement Coordinator for Liverpool Child Friendly City at the Liverpool City Council as well. So Caroline, I'm going to pass over to you to lead the way, and we can see your presentation well there. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Catherine. It's so wonderful to be here today, and Caroline's just commented to me in the chat, we're in really prestigious company with our panel of speakers that we've got.
You just put yourself on mute, Caroline.
I didn't do anything there, sorry, that came up automatically.
Did you?
Yeah, okay, so we're feeling flattered, so it's really great to be here and really excited that Cork has already got such a wonderful commitment from so many partners and organisations, and already involved so many children and young people from your city to get involved on this journey, so we're in a good stead. I think it would be useful for me to talk a little bit about what is a child-friendly city community, and I know Professor Laura Lundy spoke about it a little bit before, but this is the UNICEF definition, so a place where the local council and partners, and I can't stress enough the importance of the partner role in this programme, have committed to put children and their voices and rights at the heart of the work that they do. So not just from a children's services perspective, as we've seen this morning, right across the board from, you know, our travel partners and people like our town planning centres. Children are active and equal citizens in our communities, so let's hear their voices. We decided in Liverpool to deal with some of the challenges that we've got. So you can see on the screen there, you know, poverty is an issue. We've got some of the most deprived wards, not only in the UK, but across Europe. So that is a massive challenge for the children and young people in our city. Their health is affected by the housing conditions that they live in. This affects lots of things across their lives, including their readiness for starting school. We know that the pandemic has had a huge impact on children's speech and language development, and we want to do something to try and level that playing field. So we know that the family pressures and social factors affect the development and sometimes can affect the capacity of children to flourish at an early age, but that might also affect their social outlook and how they see their place in the world. So what did we need to do and how would we do it? We knew that to achieve our ambitions for all children and young people, we'd need to start with an ambitious programme of change with the children's rights at the heart of that. So the statement you can see on the screen is from our expression of interest, or our bid document that we submitted to UNICEF UK going back to 2018. So we actually started this journey around January of 2018. And we really started thinking about how we could work with our partners and our children in the city to develop their interest in this document from the very start. The feedback that we got from UNICEF was that it was an ambitious vision, and we were really pleased because we worked hard with our political and strategic partners to gain that commitment to our programme. We wanted to work collaboratively and creatively with UNICEF UK, local partners, and most importantly with children and young people, with them having a key role in guiding the decisions right throughout the process. So a little bit about what we've been doing in terms of our partnership with UNICEF. They give us some structure to the programme. So things like, as you can see on the screen there, the foundations, who needs to be involved, what needs to be happening, what meetings need to be taking place, how do we reach out and share our messages. And I think it's important to note that we are known as a candidate city too. So we will remain as a candidate city until we are accredited, and we hope that will happen sometime in the next 2 to 4 years. So UNICEF work alongside us right throughout the journey, and they offer us training and development. So for example, there is training around an introduction to children's rights in practice, and that's open to all of our partnership workforce, anybody who's interested, anybody who's working in research, anybody who's working face-to-face with children and young people. So that's really, getting to know what the programme is about and those foundations around the 7 key principles of working with children and young people. There's also working with children and young people as equal partners, and that's thinking through the really practical details, and some of what I saw on Laura's screen was really familiar. Looks like thinking through what are the barriers to children getting involved and young people. And UNICEF also offers additional training along the lines of training for elected members and training around impact assessments. So we have a badge framework that we work alongside UNICEF with, so that's thinking about our local priorities, and I'll come on to that in a couple of slides. We have benefited greatly from a named contact officer at UNICEF UK, and she was quite new into the role when we started our journey, so we very much grew alongside each other, and she was really insightful and helped us to challenge our thinking really, and try and do one level better, one level more in depth, one level greater in terms of accessibility and things like that. And that's an ongoing journey. We're really still developing our ways of working. And then, as you can tell from today's event, we've been linked into a wonderful network of child-friendly city candidate cities. So we learn about the evolving programmes, we join into networking events. We've got an event this afternoon for the other child-friendly city coordinators, and we also do monthly sessions with different spotlights on themes, for example, around running your governance group, thinking about who and how you influence local child-friendly city champions, and how children and young people can have their voices heard as well. So this next slide shows the journey or the 4 stages of the programme. So our discovery phase last started in 2019 and ran for about 7 or 8 months, and that helped us to identify our priorities. As we went into our development phase, that was literally the week that the country went into lockdown in 2020. So we took much longer going through our development phase, and we're coming to the start of our delivery phase now. It took a long time because we wanted to make sure that we still listened to children and that we were listening to our partners as well, but also to make sure that we had our action plans nailed on, really responsive to the needs and wants that we were hearing throughout the pandemic. So the delivery of the action plan will start very shortly. Some of it is new work, some of it is work that would have been happening across the board with Liverpool City Council and with our partners anyway. And we really hope that throughout a programme of sort of ongoing scrutiny and evidence building and evaluation, that we will become an accredited child-friendly city in a couple of years. So the next slide shows the UNICEF badge framework, and those 3 yellow ones that you can see in the centre of the screen, they are the foundation badges that all communities who come on the journey, certainly with UNICEF UK, must use as part of their journey. So the culture badge is thinking about how we respect children and how we people know about and respect children's rights. We've got communication, so how do we portray our young people? How do we share the message that this is happening in our city? And then cooperation and leadership. How do we work together, even for organisations where perhaps children aren't the key audience for their services, that they are still held in mind and their voices brought to the fore. And then the blue badges around the edge, there you have a choice of those 10 badges. and children and young people helped us to choose the 3 that we will focus on in our delivery phase. So this next slide shows our blue badges, our place. So feeling that they belong in our city. Children and young people told us that was so important to them, being able to move around safely. Feeling equal and included was really important. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you're welcome. And being able to grow up healthy, and that includes physical health, mental health, emotional health and well-being as well. So through the discovery phase from 2019, children and young people identified those 3 themes as the most important issues for them. We've worked with a huge range of children and young people, and we've done engagement through a number of ways, through face-to-face workshops, online surveys, play opportunities. We asked children and young people what they thought was great about the city and what they wanted to see change, and those strengths and gaps were highlighted, and those themes that you've just seen on the previous screens started to emerge from there. From those sessions, with lots of these organisations up on screen, we've been able to establish a young person scrutiny group for the programme, and their voice is to be, their role is to be the voice of the groups that they represent and to challenge our governance group to act on their input right throughout the child-friendly city journey. These are some of the highlights of our discovery phase, and I'm really conscious of time, but I suppose some of the highlights there were, the engagement of children and young people, thinking about identifying how many organisations there are in our city who support children and young people, and our baseline exercise showed that there were over 800 organisations, which is staggering. So there's a piece of work ongoing to try and connect our organisations up with the communities that they serve. We've done some training around our young people. We've done training with our governance boards, which is our partners, and training for our frontline staff as well, who really are the key in all of this. These are some examples of what we did during the first year of COVID, because we felt it was so important for young people to hear about the local response to the situation and for us to hear their responses as well. Some of the really insightful learning that we had at that time was how much young people wanted to volunteer, and at that time it wasn't really so much open to young people, it was more prioritising adults to get involved. We had the feedback from one young person said, I wanted to be involved in the call as it's important to know the council's response, what support is available, and to share how this is affecting so many people. It's important that our current thoughts and concerns help shape future conversations and actions, particularly concerning young people during Liverpool's response. So we've done a lot of work, and we've been working on developing things like new packs for how we engage with young people, and there's lots more examples on the screen there. I have shared the the slides with Ellen, so you can have a look at those, don't try and scribble them down too much. I just wanted to mention our action plan. So initially, as we were going through our journey, we were quite worried that we might need to deliver all of the action plan outcomes ourselves, but hopefully what you can see under on this screen is that our partners have actually really stepped up and taken lead roles in delivering all of this. We've got a really wide range of partners on our governance group, and you can see some of them up there, and I think it's fair to say that some partners are more invested and engaged than what others are. I'm going to hand over to Caroline now, and as Catherine said, Caroline is our youth engagement coordinator for the programme, so she'll tell you a bit more about some of the benefits to date for our young people. And Caroline, if you give me a nudge or a nod, I'll move the slide on when you're ready. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting us today. It's been a really inspiring event so far. So I've been on the programme for 10 months, and it's been an action-packed 10 months. We've got some highlights on the screen in front of you. I just wanted to talk about, so Liverpool Schools Parliament is a huge vehicle where children across all of our schools and alternative provisions can come together to traditionally to connect with decision makers and to feel a sense of place and belonging and inclusion in their city. We are certainly looking at it through a children's rights lens, and as the slide says, we're really trying to work with education providers to look at who are the children who ordinarily get involved in this kind of process, and actually can we challenge that a little bit, and can we invite children and young people who would not ordinarily get involved for whatever reason. And we're doing a lot of work with connecting with the Schools Parliament because of the sheer amount of children and young people that it involves. We are delighted that a network of participation practitioners has formed in recent times. And this is, so people like me, whose bread and butter is working face to face with children and young people, but also people who are, whose work is very much invested in connecting with children and young people's views and visions and making their views count. There are 40 people on that panel now, and within our first 3 months, I think, of establishment, we collectively worked to put in a bid for a piece of youth-led, very innovative research where young people would be trained and employed to run a 12-month program to enable other young people to discuss and take community action upon issues relating to violence. So you can see on the screen there that there are ambitious numbers of young people involved, and that they will be training young activists in the community and leaving a legacy of young people hopefully feeling that not only are their views vital to the growth and the improvement of our city, but that those activism tools remain a strength that we can all build on. Caroline, can I have the next slide, please? Oh, I didn't talk about early years. Would you like to talk about the early years thing briefly, because it is a really nice piece of work?
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So our early years piece of work came about in response to some UNICEF tools that were given to us, which facilitated remote participation. So that was sent out to schools and voluntary organisations during the pandemic, so that we could host some, so that they could host some virtual sessions around children's and young people's voices about their priorities and what they saw as important. And what we realised with our partners at the university was that there was a real gap in terms of how those materials were designed and how they might engage the very youngest children. So our partners at the University of Hope University have been designing with some master's students some revised tools for use with early years children, and they're being trialled at the moment in a number of nurseries and children's centres across the city.
We just have a few minutes left, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. So we have a number of we have regular events for children and young people which are connected to the badges, and they began with quite a simple kind of Q&A model where young people could meet decision makers and ask them questions about things. But in my follow-up work with children and young people, they're telling us that they need to see more from the adults that are playing a part in these events. And it's been touched upon by previous speakers about that the responsibility for accepting change and adapting the way that they would normally work that lies with the professionals. So young people moving into our events program in 2022 have developed a participation pledge for adults who are going to be playing a part in those events. So before adults come to the space, they need to know what young people need from them. and young people have talked about wanting to know what is next specifically. We'd like to hear from you about how we can continue to have dialogue with you and the project that you represent. For example, what kind of planning structures do you have within your organisation? Do you have events, forums, seminars? Are there ways that we could come along and play a part? Myself and my colleagues at the CFC team are there to give additional support to organisations who are receptive but might not be sure how they can adapt their adult design structures to really meaningfully include young people. So we're really excited about that. We've got a jam-packed 2022 ahead, and I really liked what Laura Lundy said earlier on about it's a start. We know that some of our processes they could do with enhancement, but we're getting people together and we're having those conversations and we're having a really positive start and we're having some really insightful and useful involvement from young people, and we can't wait to make that wider and more ambitious and more creative as we move on. That's me done, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And Caroline, I'm sorry to squeeze the time there at the end. Again, I could listen to you all day, and it's just the energy that you're putting towards this. And I suppose what I'm hearing from yourselves in Liverpool is you're challenging the challenging issues that children experience. So you're naming poverty, you're naming the exclusion of some children, you're acknowledging alternative education and thinking about all the different spaces where children are at and how their voices and their experiences can be included. So I think that's really important in terms of how we move forward. It's not to gloss over those issues, but to make sure they're being addressed as part of a wider plan, and to really kind of, as professionals, that we're addressing those issues and acknowledge them as well. And so I really like, you referred to activism tools and the sense of inclusion. So I think that's really important, and the idea that it's not just yourselves who are important in terms of delivering the outcomes, it's bringing everybody along with you. And I suppose I just want to really acknowledge the role of preschools, the health services and the schools, particularly in our cities, and the libraries and the arts and cultural institutions as well. So, and I'm sure that's a very familiar picture for you in Liverpool as well. Thank you both so much. I feel like we haven't given you enough time at all, but we will definitely come back to you, and we will share, if that's okay, your slides again on the Healthy Cities website. I know Denise is telling me to move along, so I'm going to do that. Thank you again. We do have the graphic harvest is still there, and I'm going to indulge ourselves just for a minute. We still have quite a lot of people here, and I'd love it if we could just spend 2 minutes doing the final Mentimeter so that we can include that in the graphic harvest. And the question, I suppose, leaning on all of that you've heard today, what should the priorities for us for Cork Child Friendly City be? I suppose that's not including the voices of children at this point, and we've heard a little bit from the Freedom of the City initiative, but what do you think from what you've heard today should be the priorities for us? And maybe if you could name your top 3 things, that would be really helpful. And while you're doing that, I think, so the link to that will be put in the chat there, and Ellen will put that there, and we'll start generating that. And while we're doing that, we might just, Denise, do you want to say a few words just in summary to wrap up there while people are putting that love?
Thanks, Catherine. It's been a fantastic morning. Thanks to everyone who's contributed. I know Billund in Denmark wanted to contribute as well, but unfortunately their presenter fell ill yesterday. So they're happy to send us their presentation and a recording as well for the website. I think this morning has shown us that there's huge amount of interest in this. You know, as we can see, we've done a few really child-friendly initiatives in Cork, and we have a bit to build on. It's been wonderful to hear from Belfast as always, and the work that they've done, and the tools and resources there will be really useful. And I know in the comments and in the conversation, a lot of people are saying that. It was wonderful to see the Lundy model as well, and to hear directly from Professor Lundy in terms of children's participation. And I really took on board that comment about tokenism, not being afraid of that, because that can be used as an excuse not to do things. And I have heard that actually, where people are afraid to engage because they don't want to be seen to be tokenistic. So I guess it's better than not engaging, and it's a first step. But I'd love for us in Cork to really develop our skills, and I think Liverpool have set out a really nice pathway there for us to really engage with children. I'm very excited to see the graphic harvest. We'll have that on the website as well, and I think it's something that we will use to inform our action planning process here in Cork as well. So just really to say I'm excited and kind of motivated and energized by this morning's session, and thanks to everyone for contributing. Delighted to be involved.
Thank you, Denise. The graphic harvest, I don't know how you manage that, Hazel, but thank you so much for creating that. And I know there's a bit to go, the thumbs up there. And look at that fantastic Mentimeter. And I suppose at the heart of that is inclusion. And I think that is really a strong message, I suppose, to close our proceedings today. We want children to feel included, connected, and belong, and feel safe, and be able to participate in the city as an equal in the city. And so I'm delighted to see that at the heart of it. I'd like to thank all of our guests, especially our speakers who have attended today, and all of you who have come here showing an interest. And if you do want to get involved, please get in touch with us. We'd love to welcome you onto the working group, and all of the resources and learning tools that we've covered today will be on the Healthy Cities website. It's just past 1 o'clock, so I think I pulled it back at the end, and we'll be delighted to further this conversation with you. But I think the biggest next step for us is to have that conversation with children. So watch this space, and thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Thank you.